My mother threw me out the day I told her I was pregnant. I was 18. She gave me exactly 2 hours to pack my things, called me a disgrace, and said that since I'd chosen this life, I could deal with the consequences myself. By the time I finished stuffing clothes into 2 garbage bags, she'd already changed the locks. I sat on the front steps with nowhere to go. The father of my baby was a guy I'd met once during freshman orientation. He introduced himself as Alex, said he was visiting from Switzerland, and after that night, I never saw him again. I didn't know his last name, didn't have his number, and had no way to find him. I dropped out of college, moved into a shelter, and gave birth to my daughter, Jana, alone in a county hospital. Meanwhile, my mother told everyone I'd run off to become a stripper in Las Vegas. The next 5 years were brutal. I waited tables where customers thought $2 tips gave them permission to grab me. Jana slept in a dresser drawer because I couldn't afford a crib. We lived in a tiny apartment with black mold, roaches, and barely enough food to get through the week. I relied on food stamps, WIC, and walked 4 miles to work before sunrise because the buses didn't run that early. My mother lived only 20 minutes away in a 4-bedroom house. She never called, never visited, told the entire family I was dead to her. Only my younger sister, Denise, secretly met me in parks with secondhand clothes for Jana. She wanted to help more, but Mom had threatened to cut her off financially if she did. So I kept going. I earned my GED online while Jana napped. When she turned 3, I enrolled in community college. I found better restaurant jobs, saved every dollar I could, and eventually moved us into a safer apartment. Everything I did was for my daughter. She was bright, funny, reading before kindergarten, and already doing simple math. Then, last month, everything changed. A man walked into my restaurant wearing an expensive suit and speaking with a Swiss accent. He stared at me for almost a minute before asking if I'd attended State University 5 years earlier. My heart stopped. It was Alex. Except now he introduced himself as Alessandro Moretti. He told me his family owned a luxury hotel chain across Europe. 2 years earlier, his cousin had found an old orientation photo from college, and he'd spent thousands of dollars hiring investigators and searching for me because he couldn't stop thinking about the girl he'd met that night. When I showed him a picture of Jana, he broke down crying right there in the restaurant. He admitted his father had spent years trying to arrange a marriage for him, but he'd never been able to forget me. Within a week, everything moved unbelievably fast. He set up a trust fund for Jana, bought us a house, insisted on paying 5 years of back child support. His family flew over from Switzerland and welcomed Jana as if she'd always belonged to them. That's when my mother suddenly remembered she had a daughter. She arrived at my new house carrying flowers and fake tears. She said she'd made a mistake, that she'd missed us every day. That family deserved second chances. But I knew exactly why she was there. The neighbors had seen the Mercedes in my driveway. They'd seen the Swiss license plates. They'd seen expensive furniture being delivered. She'd figured out exactly who Alessandro was and how wealthy his family was. She didn't come back because she'd missed me. She came back because my daughter suddenly had a trust fund, a rich father, and a future she wanted to be part of. I let her talk. She blamed youth, fear, tough love. She said she'd only wanted me to learn responsibility. Then her eyes landed on a framed photo of Jana standing beside Alessandro's family outside their estate in Switzerland. Her entire expression changed. "We should plan her 6th birthday together," she said excitedly. "Maybe even celebrate in Switzerland. I've always wanted to see Geneva." At that exact moment, Alessandro walked into the room. He'd heard every word. Alessandro looked at my mother's outstretched hand as if it disgusted him. "So," he said quietly, "you're the woman who threw your pregnant 18-year-old daughter onto the street." My mother immediately switched back to her rehearsed speech. "It wasn't like that. I was trying to teach her responsibility. Sometimes tough love." He cut her off. Without raising his voice, he pulled out his phone. My investigators documented everything while they were searching for her. He opened the first file. "This is the shelter intake report. It lists your daughter as a homeless pregnant teenager." He swiped again. "This is the emergency housing application she filed 8 months pregnant." Another document. "This is the hospital record showing she gave birth alone because she had no family support." My mother's face lost all color. She tried to interrupt, saying she hadn't realized how bad things had gotten. Alessandro ignored the excuse. He kept scrolling through hospital records, social services files, and official documents that laid out, month by month, exactly what my daughter and I had survived while my mother lived 20 minutes away. For the first time in my life, she had nothing to say. She reached toward me with shaking hands. "I was scared. I made a terrible mistake. I've thought about you every single day." I stepped back before she could touch me. "You need to leave." Alessandro quietly walked beside me as I opened the front door. My mother looked from him to me, still hoping someone would stop her from leaving. Please, just let me explain. I kept the door open. Eventually, she picked up the flowers she'd brought, lowered her head, and walked out without another word. I watched her drive away before closing the door. Only then did my legs finally start shaking. That night, after making sure Jana was asleep upstairs, Alessandro admitted he'd never intended to confront my mother like that. When he'd hired investigators to find me, they'd uncovered everything I'd gone through. He'd kept every document in case I ever needed proof of what had happened. Instead of rushing into being part of Jana's life, he surprised me. I think the first step should be a legal DNA test, he said. Not because I doubt she's mine, because you both deserve legal protection. 2 days later, we met with attorney Leah Mercer. The first thing she told me caught me completely off guard. I don't represent Alessandro, she said. He hired me, but I work for you. She explained every legal step we'd need. Court-admissible DNA testing, financial protections, custody rights, child support. Until the DNA results came back, every dollar of back child support would sit safely in escrow. The house Alessandro had bought was legally transferred into my name, with documents, making sure it could never be taken away from Jana and me, regardless of what happened between us. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. Then Denise texted me. Mom had started calling every relative she knew. Now she was telling everyone I was cruel for keeping Jana away from her. 5 years earlier, she told those same people I was dead. Now, she wanted sympathy because I wouldn't let her play grandmother. For a moment, the old fear came back, the fear of being completely alone. Then I remembered something. None of those relatives had looked for me when they believed I'd become a stripper. None of them had asked whether I was alive. Their opinions no longer mattered. That evening, I sat on Jana's bed and told her someone very important from my past wanted to meet her. I didn't call him her father yet. Nothing had been confirmed. She looked at me seriously. Is he nice? I smiled. I hope so. We're going to find out together. A few days later, we met Alessandro at a public park. He didn't arrive carrying expensive presents. He brought a simple soccer ball. He asked Jana about her favorite color, what cartoons she liked, and whether swings or slides were more fun. She stayed close to me at first, answering quietly from behind my leg. Little by little, she relaxed. When she asked why he talked differently, he laughed and explained he was from Switzerland. Then she asked the question only a 5-year-old would ask. Do you have McDonald's there? He laughed again. Yes, but the menu is in French and German. For the next hour, they kicked the soccer ball back and forth while I watched from a nearby bench. He never tried to impress her, never made huge promises. He simply treated her like she mattered. Watching them together, I realized something. He wasn't trying to buy his way into her life. He was trying to earn a place in it. A week later, my mother left me a voicemail. She said she forgave me for keeping Jana away from her, that she was ready to move forward, that we should be a family again. I listened to it twice before deleting it. For the first time, I realized I didn't owe her another explanation. Silence felt better than another argument. Still, I wasn't naive. During my lunch break one day, I went to the public library and started researching grandparents' rights in our state. The law was on my side. Grandparents usually needed an existing relationship with the child or proof that cutting contact would harm them. My mother had neither. But I also learned something else. Even weak cases could drag families through expensive court battles. I photographed the relevant statutes, emailed everything to Leah, and asked one simple question. Should I be worried? She called me the next day. Not yet, she said, but we need to protect ourselves before your mother makes the first move. We scheduled another meeting. This time it wasn't about Alessandro. It was about building a paper trail. Every voicemail, every message, every unwanted visit, everything would be documented. That same weekend, Denise asked if we could meet for coffee. She looked exhausted. I want to help you, she admitted, but Mom's paying my tuition. If I go against her, she'll cut me off. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You already helped me more than anyone else. She'd been the one secretly bringing diapers, clothes, and baby supplies when nobody else cared whether Jana and I survived. I wasn't about to ask her to sacrifice her future too. A few days later, the official DNA test took place. The technician carefully explained the legal chain of custody before collecting samples from Alessandro and Jana. Jana giggled the entire time. Are they checking for cavities? Alessandro smiled. Something like that. We agreed not to tell her the real reason until everything became official. When the testing was finished, we walked outside together, feeling strangely relieved. Now all we could do was wait. While we waited, Leah helped us draft the framework for a legal parenting plan. Nothing rushed, nothing emotional. Everything focused on Jana, Supervised visits at first, a gradual schedule based on her comfort. Clear rules for holidays, school, medical decisions, and financial support. For the first time, Alessandro and I weren't reacting to chaos. We were building stability. Then my mother crossed another line. One afternoon, Jana's school called me. The administrator calmly explained that a woman claiming to be Jana's grandmother had shown up asking questions about pickup procedures. My stomach dropped. I left work immediately and drove straight to the school. Thankfully, they hadn't released any information. Before I left, I filled out paperwork restricting anyone from accessing Jana without my permission. The next morning, Leah sent my mother a formal no-contact letter. It warned that any further attempts to contact Jana, interfere with school, or spread false stories could lead to legal action. Signing it made me sick. She was still my mother. But for the first time, protecting my daughter mattered more than protecting someone else's feelings. That night, I started keeping a journal. Every voicemail, every encounter, every lie, every incident. Not because I wanted revenge, because if this ever ended up in court, I wanted facts instead of memories. Around the same time, Alessandro showed me a catalog filled with extravagant dollhouses that cost thousands of dollars. He genuinely believed Jana deserved the very best after everything she'd missed. I gently told him she didn't need a $3,000 dollhouse. She needed parents who showed up. She'd probably be happier with one from the toy store and a trip to the zoo. Instead of arguing, he listened. Then he smiled. So, the science museum instead? That conversation meant more to me than any expensive gift ever could. He wasn't just learning how to be Jana's father. He was learning how to be part of our life. 3 days later, the DNA results arrived. Neither of us was surprised. The report confirmed what we'd already known. Alessandro was Jana's biological father. That evening, we sat with her on the couch. He spoke gently. "I didn't know you existed," he told her, "but I've been looking for you and your mommy for a very long time. Now that I've found you, I'd like to be part of your life." Jana was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Does that mean I have grandparents in Switzerland?" We both smiled. "Yes," I said, "you do. And someday, if you're ready, you'll get to meet them." She nodded, accepted the answer, and went back to coloring. Kids have a way of processing huge news one piece at a time. The next day, Leah suggested something I hadn't considered: a child therapist. "This isn't because anything is wrong with Jana," she explained. "It's because she's experiencing a major life change. Having someone neutral can help." We scheduled an appointment. I was beginning to understand that asking for help wasn't weakness. It was another way of protecting my daughter. Not long after that, another problem appeared. A local reporter somehow learned that a wealthy European businessman had discovered he had a daughter in America. She left me a voicemail asking for my side of the story before publishing anything. I panicked. One article could turn our lives into gossip overnight. Leah's advice was immediate. Don't respond. No interview, no statement, no comment. She explained that stories without cooperation usually died quickly. Giving reporters even one quote would keep the story alive. So I stayed silent. A few days later, another envelope arrived. This one was from my mother. 5 handwritten pages. At first, it sounded like an apology. Then the demands started. She talked about family vacations, birthday parties, trips to Switzerland, how she wanted to be involved in every part of Jana's life. By the last page, it was obvious. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for access. The entire letter went straight into my evidence folder. Around the same time, Jana began seeing her therapist. The sessions were simple: drawing, games, talking through feelings. Afterward, the therapist gave Alessandro and me the same advice: go slowly, keep routines predictable, let Jana decide the pace. We followed every recommendation. No sudden changes, no overwhelming introductions, no pressure. That same week, Denise called. She wondered whether allowing some supervised contact with Mom might stop her from filing for grandparents' rights out of spite. I understood why she asked. She was trapped between us. But I also knew giving in because of guilt was exactly how my mother had controlled everyone for years. Before making any decision, I called Leah. She reviewed the law again. Legally, my mother had almost no standing. Still, Leah recommended offering mediation. "If this ever reaches court," she said, "it shows you're being reasonable while setting firm boundaries." I agreed, but only under strict conditions. My mother would have to acknowledge exactly what she'd done. Start therapy. Respect every boundary, and understand that any relationship with Jana would happen only if I believed it was safe. Before mediation even happened, another surprise waited for me. The reporter published her article. I opened it expecting the worst. Instead, it focused on privacy, family law, and the challenges of reconnecting after years apart. Because we'd refused to participate, there was almost no personal drama to print. The story disappeared within days. At work, people mentioned seeing it. Nobody pushed for details. Then Denise sent me a text. For the first time in her life, she'd finally stood up to our mother. Mom had called again, demanding that Denise convince me to let her see Jana. Instead, Denise told her something she'd never said before. If you want a relationship with them, earn it. Stop using me. Reading those words nearly made me cry. For years, we'd both lived in fear of upsetting our mother. Now my little sister was finally choosing herself. It felt like both of us were breaking free at the same time. Meanwhile, Alessandro and I continued building our parenting plan, one careful step at a time. Sometimes he wanted to move faster. Sometimes I needed to slow things down. But every disagreement ended the same way. One question: what's best for Jana? As long as we kept answering that question honestly, we always found our way back to the same side. The mediation was scheduled 2 weeks later. Before it began, the mediator laid out one simple rule. This isn't about excuses, she said. It's about accountability. My mother cried almost immediately. She admitted she'd made mistakes, that she'd been scared, that she thought she was doing the right thing. I let her finish. Then I looked at her. I don't need you to explain why you did it. I need you to admit what you did. The room went silent. So I listed it myself. You gave your pregnant daughter 2 hours to leave. You changed the locks. You ignored me for 5 years. You told everyone I was dead. You knew where I lived. You knew your granddaughter existed. You never came. Every sentence landed harder than the last. She kept crying, but stopped trying to defend herself. The mediator asked her to write down every action she'd taken without adding a single excuse. That assignment would determine whether we moved forward. When I walked out of the office, I felt emotionally exhausted, but lighter. For the first time, someone else had watched the truth unfold instead of only hearing my mother's version. A few days later, I met with Jana's therapist again. We talked about what healthy reconciliation actually looked like. The therapist was very clear. One apology wouldn't erase 5 years. Real change required consistency, months of therapy, respect for boundaries, no manipulation, no guilt. Only after all of that would we even consider supervised contact between my mother and Jana. That timeline made sense to me. Trust couldn't be rebuilt with words, only with actions. Meanwhile, life with Alessandro slowly became easier. He visited regularly, video called Jana during the week, never missed a scheduled visit. One afternoon, he asked if his parents could have a few recent photos of Jana for their family album. My first instinct was to say no. For years, I'd protected her from everyone. The idea of pictures of my daughter crossing an ocean made me nervous. So I called Leah. She reminded me that healthy boundaries didn't mean saying no to everything. They meant deciding exactly what I was comfortable with. The next day, I gave Alessandro 3 photos, one of Jana reading, one at the playground, one smiling at the camera. I also set one condition: no social media, family only. He agreed immediately. No arguments. No pressure, just thank you. That mattered more than he probably realized. Then Denise called early one morning. Check Mom's Facebook. My stomach tightened before I even opened the app. She'd posted dozens of old family pictures, photos of me as a little girl, pictures of Denise, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. The caption read, "My precious girls. Family is forever." Hundreds of people commented about what a wonderful mother she was. Not a single picture showed the last 5 years. Not one mentioned that she'd thrown me out while I was pregnant. Denise had already taken screenshots. Save everything, she told me. So I did. Every post, every caption, every comment, straight into my evidence folder. A few days later, Leah called. My mother's lawyer accepted mediation terms, she said. I was surprised. The conditions were strict. My mother would have to attend therapy, accept written boundaries, acknowledge every specific action she'd taken, and understand that seeing Jana was never guaranteed. Leah warned me not to get my hopes up. Signing papers is easy, she said. Living by them is much harder. Not long after that, Alessandro and I finalized our temporary parenting agreement. Everything was documented. His visits, video calls, financial support, medical decisions, school decisions. Nothing depended on trust alone anymore. Everything was in writing. For someone who'd spent years surviving uncertainty, seeing our future laid out on official paper felt strangely comforting. For the first time since I'd become pregnant, I wasn't just reacting to one crisis after another. I was finally building a stable life for my daughter. And no matter what my mother did next, that wasn't something she could take away from us. The next few months proved something I never expected. People can change, but only if they're willing to do the work. My mother kept showing up to therapy every week. She stopped trying to contact me directly, stopped sending guilt-filled messages, stopped asking Denise to pressure me. Instead, every update came through the mediator. No drama, just documentation. Eventually, the therapist recommended one supervised meeting between my mother and me before involving Jana. I agreed. We met in the mediator's office. My mother arrived carrying 3 handwritten pages. This time, she didn't make excuses. She read every line aloud. She admitted throwing me out, changing the locks, ignoring Denise's calls when she'd begged her to help me, knowing I was homeless and choosing not to check whether I was alive, missing Jana's birth even after knowing which hospital I was in, telling our relatives I'd abandoned the family instead of admitting what she'd done. She cried while reading, but she never once tried to justify herself. When she finished, she looked at me and whispered, "I'm sorry." I believed she was sorry, but that wasn't the same as trusting her. "I accept this as a beginning," I told her, "not as forgiveness." She nodded. "I understand." For the first time in my life, she didn't argue. She didn't ask for anything. She simply accepted my answer. The mediator documented everything and reminded us that rebuilding trust would take years, not weeks. Around the same time, I adjusted my work schedule so I could spend more evenings with Jana. My manager didn't hesitate. "You've earned it," he said. After everything we'd survived, even small acts of kindness still surprised me. Alessandro and I also met with Jana's school. Together, we explained that her father had recently been found and that we were establishing a legal co-parenting arrangement. We asked the staff to keep everything private and direct any questions to us instead of discussing our family with other parents. The principal agreed immediately. She also updated the pickup authorization list and promised the staff would watch for any problems. Every piece of Jana's life was becoming more secure. Then came the first supervised visit between my mother and Jana. It took place at a family center with trained staff present. The rules were simple. No expensive gifts, no promises, no secrets, just conversation. I waited outside the room for an hour that felt much longer. When the visit ended, my mother didn't try to hug Jana. She thanked the staff, said goodbye, and left exactly as instructed. On the drive home, I asked Jana how she felt. She thought for a moment. "Grandma seems nice." Then she added, "But she was kind of sad." I smiled. "Would you like to see her again?" "Maybe. Not right away." That answer decided everything. Nobody was going to rush my daughter, not even me. The therapist agreed. Jana would choose the pace. 3 weeks later came her 6th birthday. We kept it simple. A party at the local park, cake from the grocery store, balloons, paper plates, tag, musical chairs, kids laughing until they couldn't breathe. Alessandro handled decorations exactly the way I'd asked. Nothing extravagant, just enough to make Jana smile. My mother arrived during her approved 30-minute visit. No gifts, no speeches. She stayed quietly in the background, talked with Jana, wished her happy birthday, and left exactly on time. I watched her walk away and realized something had changed. Not my trust, not yet, but my fear. For years, I'd believed every interaction with my mother would end in manipulation. This time it hadn't. Maybe therapy really was changing something. Maybe. A few days later, Denise met me for lunch. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years. "I finally set boundaries," she said. "I told Mom that if she wants to complain about you, she can do it with her therapist instead of me." I laughed. "I'm proud of you." She smiled. "I think I'm finally learning that keeping everyone happy isn't my job." For the first time since we were children, we weren't just sisters surviving the same mother. We were building our own relationship. And that might have been one of the biggest victories of all. Not long after Jana's birthday, I received my acceptance letter from community college. I'd applied months earlier, but after everything that had happened, I'd almost forgotten about it. I was officially starting classes in the spring: business, English, accounting. For the first time, I could afford textbooks without wondering whether buying them meant we wouldn't eat that week. Sitting at my kitchen table with that letter in my hands, I realized something. Nobody had rescued me, not really. By the time Alessandro found us, Jana and I had already survived the hardest years. I'd built our life one shift, one class, one paycheck at a time. Now I finally had help. There was a difference. A few weeks later, Alessandro returned to Switzerland. Before he left, he and Jana filled in her calendar with stickers showing every video call and every future visit. It became their routine. Every evening they talked, she crossed another day off the calendar, and the distance stopped feeling so frightening because she always knew when she'd see him again. Our parenting plan was finally approved. Everything we'd spent months building became official. Financial support, shared decision-making, visitation, legal recognition. Everything was documented. There were no assumptions anymore, only clear responsibilities. Meanwhile, my mother continued attending therapy. Month after month, she followed every rule we'd established. She never demanded more time with Jana. Never argued when I said no. Never tried to go around me. Every supervised visit ended exactly when it was supposed to. The therapist kept sending progress reports. They all said the same thing. She was doing the work, slowly, consistently. That didn't erase what she'd done. But it mattered. One evening, after Jana had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room thinking about the last 6 years. I remembered the shelter, the hospital where I'd given birth alone, the apartment with mold and roaches, counting coins before buying formula, walking miles to work before sunrise, wondering every single day whether we would make it through another week. Those memories never really disappeared, and I didn't want them to. They reminded me why I protected my daughter the way I did, why I questioned everything, why I insisted on legal paperwork instead of promises, why I refused to rush forgiveness. That wasn't bitterness, it was experience. It had kept us alive. Today, our life looks completely different. Jana has two parents who work together and put her first. She has grandparents in Switzerland who love her from a respectful distance. She has a grandmother who's slowly earning another chance instead of demanding one. She has an aunt who's no longer afraid to speak for herself. And I have something I never thought I'd have again: peace. Not because everything became perfect. It didn't. Some wounds don't disappear, but we built something stronger than what we lost. A family based on boundaries instead of control, on trust instead of fear, on actions instead of promises. Looking back, I realized my mother throwing me out had changed every one of our lives. She lost 5 years with her granddaughter. I lost my family. Jana lost the chance to know her father from the beginning. None of that could ever be undone. But what happened afterward proved something I'll never forget. The people who truly love you don't ask you to forget the past. They accept responsibility for it. They respect your boundaries. And they understand that forgiveness isn't something they're owed. It's something they have to earn. That was the lesson my mother finally learned. And it was the reason my daughter would grow up in a very different family than the one I came from.